Let's go live to our Sky News political contributor now, Chris Uhlmann. What a treat for me to have you on the program, Chris. Great to see you. There's so much to talk about. Let's start with US politics because it is quite a spectacle this week, but it matters in the frame of things if Kamala Harris can maintain that momentum. We know she's got the money behind her from the Democrats, but can she win in those 6 swing states? Well, that is the big question here, especially when it comes to her strength on the economy.
Yeah, Laura, there are a lot of questions that remain about Kamala Harris, and she's yet to answer them in any kind of press conference or any kind of long-form interview. And clearly the package at the moment looks very good. The Democrats absolutely made the right decision in getting rid of Joe Biden. I was in Washington when that decision was being made. But interestingly, behind the scenes, talking to some of the Democrats then, as they were trying to blast Joe Biden from office, the concern about Kamala Harris was that she was a fragile candidate, that she wasn't much good, that she didn't do a good job on border protection. Now, they've made the right choice, but they have 75 days to go before the election. 75 days and 11 hours and 50-something minutes at the moment, and a lot can happen, as you know, in that time, Laura. Maintaining momentum is what matters.
I'm glad you're watching the clock for us, Chris. Yeah, you're right. Kamala Harris, before she became the presumptive nominee, you couldn't find many Democrats inside Washington that had great things to say about her. The reaction to her was lukewarm at best. But then I think she perhaps even surprised herself. She definitely surprised a lot of her colleagues. But has she been pressure tested? That's a question. You point out that she hasn't done any media interviews and she hasn't put herself up to scrutiny. And you'd have to say that Donald Trump is rattled at the moment. So there's going to be a lot of hubris in that room there in Chicago at the moment, but a lot can happen in 75 days, can't it?
Yeah, and you're dead right. What she's done is reverse the pressure. Donald Trump is now feeling the pressure. He clearly wasn't feeling any pressure at all with Joe Biden in the chair because the man honestly looked like a walking corpse, and it was getting worse by the day. And when the scales finally fell from the Democrats' eyes, they recognised that they needed to make some kind of radical change, and Kamala Harris was essentially the only person that they could really throw to. I thought it was interesting at the time that there was silence from the Obamas for a couple of days about that. I don't know that she was their first choice, but now they are right behind her. Now the momentum is behind her. What they need to do is to make sure that that continues. And I'm sure one of the reasons why there's been no press conference or no long-form interview is she will at the moment be being schooled in absolutely everything by the people around her. They will try and make it as safe as they possibly can when she does face that kind amazing.
Imagine the politics behind the politics. Thanks for reminding us about Obama's silence in the days after she became the presumptive nominee. Now he's the headline act today. Perhaps the Obamas just like to pick a winner.
Yeah, and look, the other thing too, it's not just Barack Obama, but Michelle Obama is extremely important in the United States. And there was some talk for some time, and I thought that this would have been the absolute slam dunk of a move, that Michelle Obama would come out as the candidate. And if that was the case, I would think that you could possibly put your glasses down. She is among one of the most respected people in the United States, which doesn't have a lot of respect for anyone that's still alive. Apparently on that list, by the way, the number one most respected person in the US that I saw is Martin Luther King. He's been long dead. And by the way, I thought the interesting demonstrations outside this conference, don't forget Chicago 1968. The demonstrations that we're seeing at the moment outside this Democratic conference are tame. The streets essentially ran with blood in 1968 outside Chicago. So if they stay the way they are at the moment, I think the Democrats would be pretty happy.
Yeah, I think so as well. But it still reminds us that it's a live issue, perhaps not a vote-changing issue because cost of living, immigration perhaps ahead of this issue, but it's still a live issue in this election, as it is where you sit right now in Canberra. The issue of Palestinian visas being visas granted for Palestinians in Gaza. The coalition say too quickly and too generous. Now, I think the government's been really flat-footed, Chris, but now they're starting to come out with historical facts saying, well, the coalition actually granted these kinds of visas. They did this in Afghanistan, et cetera, et cetera. What's your observation of where this debate is going? Obviously, there's a lot of politics in it, as you'd expect.
Yeah, facts, smacks, everything runs on emotions nowadays, doesn't it? And there's a simplicity in the messages from the Coalition and the Greens. The Coalition says no, the Greens say yes, the Labor Party says somewhere in between. And by the way, let's remember what they did when they were in office. I don't know that that's going to cut a whole lot of ice with a lot of people in the community. I think Peter Dutton made the decision that he made because he knew that he would get a head nod from a lot of people in the community. As much as they'd like to be generous, there would be a concern about what kind of person was coming here. And by the way, you couldn't tell over a period of time. I think that there's every reason to imagine that the generation of people who are living in the Gaza Strip at the moment will be horrendously radicalised by what they've done, because why wouldn't they be, Laura? No matter what side you support, if you were put through that, where do you think you would land on the other side if you saw your family die? So I think there is a question about the people who come from there, but Australia has been historically generous, has allowed refugees, and by any measure, people coming out of Gaza, if they can get out at the moment, they are refugees. They have a right to claim that status in Australia, and the government is right to see if they can process some of them, but they can't do it without great checks and balances. But if you're going to make a straight political argument, what do you want to do? Laura, would you like to do the simple argument or the really hard, complicated one?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think what's further complicating issues, separate from what we just talked about there with the Gaza visa issues, is the Teals coming out today and saying there's misogynistic and aggressive behaviour in the chamber. And they're not saying it's the entire chamber. They're pointing the finger at the coalition. This is at the same time, Chris, where you see new legislation being put forward, Deidre Chambers' moment about MPs' standards and how that can be curtailed, if you like. But I think this debate is really, really tough. What is robust debate and when does it cross the line? I mean, those chambers have always been so noisy.
Yeah, they have, and it's a contest of ideas right now. It shows in some of the comments that we get across the chamber how small those ideas are, how really poor some of the rhetoric is in the chamber, and that you think, really, that's the best you've got? You know, apparently one of the things that the Teals heard was across the chamber, tear him another one. Now, I'm not saying that that is necessarily the best thing that you could say in a chamber. Do I take great offence at that? No, I simply think the person who said it really doesn't have much ammunition to fire if that's the best that they've got. Some very clever things have been said in the chamber over the years. I think we've got to separate some of these issues. And look, I'd be interested in your take. You worked in this building for a very long time. I think the culture of this building, in a lot of ways, outside the chamber, does need some serious retooling and does need some serious change. But again, it's a pressure cooker environment. But inside the chamber, I think that a certain level of robustness is absolutely what I want to see. I'd like to see a little bit more imagination in some of the things that they say.
I agree.
But yeah, which of the bits of this building do you think are most
a little bit of repartee?
Is where you start in the chamber?
Repartee, witty comments, pithy comments. I think they're all welcome and add to the national debate. It has been described as a big boarding school there in Canberra, and I don't disagree. My biggest gripe is how unproductive it is. They work super long hours, and I don't think that's very productive. I was the first journalist to take my baby, Sophie at the time, into the press gallery, and that was just a logistical issue. I had to do that. So obviously I don't think it's that fierce if I'm going to take my child in there. What I find really difficult is I think the claim of misogyny is a really big claim. And I don't know, yes, there is robust debate. Sometimes comments aren't very nice across the chamber. They can be a bit aggressive. But are they just being targeted to women? Oh, I don't know about that. But also, I'm not a Teal candidate, Teal MP in there. I don't know. What do you reckon?
Yeah, look, the other thing too is, Laura, that don't forget there are a lot of people who share this building and, you know, they're not all politicians. Some of them are journalists. And this is a point that I've made many times. In the vast report that was delivered on the standards in Parliament about the kind of bullying that went on, there was a journalist that was mentioned, never named, but being responsible for an enormous amount of bullying. There's never been any great interest in who that journalist is, and yet they're the only journalist that figures in that report. I think that's an interesting question. I'm not going to pursue it myself, but I think that people who talk about standards in this place should live by them. And if, by the way, you're someone who was mentioned in that report and you're not living up to the standards that you're now demanding of everybody else, maybe you should go and, as they say in the old Australian parliaments, have a long, hard look in the mirror.
Yeah. And look, I think with all these things, and when it comes down to the bill, Chris, you might disagree or agree with me here, the MPs and our politicians are somehow setting the moral standards and then judging each other. I find... well, look, difficult to get my head around, to say the very least, but also we risk setting standards that literally no one can live by 100% of the time.
And look, hypocrisy is one of the highest standards that's set in this place sometimes. And can I say that through the course of the time that I've watched Australian politics, one of the parties that has been most personal, that is more likely than any other to call into question someone else's morality, to essentially accuse them of being racist or misogynist, has been the Greens. Their language at times, if you listen to it, is really quite violent. And yet they get to leave pass on all of this stuff. And so they are constantly calling into question the motivation of people in the Labor Party and people in the Liberal Party. And can I say the independents quite often put themselves up as some kind of non-politician politician. They are all politicians. They are all playing the same game, and sometimes they all play it very, very hard. So yes, I think that a bit of self-reflection wouldn't hurt.
Chris Uhlmann, it is my absolute pleasure to be talking to you today, and I've really indulged.
And you as always.
Chris, we'll see you soon.